change. But as Fitzgerald wrote, the moving finger writes, and having read moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wish out a word of it. Instead, we negotiated the Single European Act, a very odd name for what I thought was the European Single Market Act. And that act was not contrary to what the dopey European fanatics claim, a huge transfer of sovereignty from the member states to the EEC. Our law officers told us its powers were ring-fenced within the economic sector and couldn't be used to achieve non-economic goals. I have no doubt they would have been right had that treaty been adjudicated according to English law in English courts. But alas, it was not. It is adjudicated by the aggressive judicial imperialists of the European courts. And looking back, I can now see that Enoch Power and that great Lord Chief Justice Denning were right. In the European establishment, English law is an obstacle to the European Republican project. To us, it has long been a protection against overmighty monarchs or politicians, and it should now be a protection against the authoritarianism of the Eurostate in Brussels. But gradually, in my many hours at ministerial meetings in Brussels, forgive me, let me confess I greatly enjoy the company of most of my colleagues. I began to realise that with the exception of the Scandinavians, and to some extent the Germans, they all shared a quite different view from ours of the relationship between the state, the individual, and the law, and of the basis on which what we call our rights and they call human rights. In short, over more than 1,000 years, we have built a constitution based on the concept that the people have rights which exist without any law to grant those rights, and despite any law which purports to deny them. And we believe that the state, just as much as the people, must obey the law. Or in Lord Denning's words, no matter how high you may be, the law is above you. Here, almost alone in Europe, government has, until the last decade at least, stuck by those numerous conventions which, being unwritten, are more flexible and more capable of adaptation than written constitutions. My European colleagues thought that our insistence that the state, the government, should obey the law and has no power to do what it has not been given by law, somewhat pedantic, even curious. They mostly took the traditional Roman law view that which was not specifically permitted by law was by implication forbidden to individuals, but the converse applied to the state. they mostly understood the importance in our law and constitution of Magna Carta. But I couldn't blame them for falling into the same trap in which we find most British people, including politicians and school teachers, by believing that King John, in signing the Charter, had granted rights to the people. Whereas, of course, he signed an undertaking not to claim or to purport to have power to rob the people of the rights they possessed by nature, their nature of being English barons or freemen. Few of my European colleagues shared those basic assumptions on which our law, our society, our constitution are based. Let me say at once, that doesn't mean that France is less civilized, or that Germany is less efficient, or that I would find life in Italy unbearable. I might even be able to pass away a weekend in a villa in Corfu. But I hope I wouldn't have the sense not to go on board a yacht. But for us here in Britain, to fall into the mould of a European state would involve far deeper changes than it would for the mainland states. And our present state, in which we are governed mostly in the first instance by English law, but that law is open to review and to be overridden by European law, is the worst of all possible worlds. The Bruges speech was essentially a recognition of these differences, and it was a series of proposals to construct a European family home in which we could live happily with our European friends. So what were Lady Thatcher's guiding principles for the future? The first was that willing and active cooperation between independent sovereign states is the best way to build a successful European community. The second was that community policies must tackle present problems in a practical way. And Margaret, you emphasised the need to reform the common agricultural policy. And 20 years on, the need still exists. Your third principle was the need for community policies which encourage enterprise. Oh dear God. It was a clarion call for deregulation, less government intervention and less state control. And you brushed aside the proposed single currency in favour of the free movement of capital and a free market in financial services and investment. And your fourth principle concerned the most fundamental issue, the European countries' role in defence. You upheld the role of NATO and emphasised that we cannot rely forever on others for our defence, but that each member of the alliance must shoulder a fair share of the burden. So true today. How true it is when we see that in the face of Russian aggression in Georgia, the would-be European state can neither agree a policy nor can it deploy the armed forces necessary to prevent further aggression.